What if brand wasn't something you expressed, but something you engineered? What if your brand guidelines weren't a slide deck, but a system, a product with documentation, feedback loops, and real adoption? And what happens when a 190-year-old company decides to stop outsourcing its identity and start scaling brand like a platform? In this episode, I sit down with Eric Alberts, design director at Wolters Kluwer, and he talks to us exactly about what that looks like. He's applying user experience and product design thinking to brand, building systems that span thousands of people, dozens of acquisitions, and hundreds of internal and external creators. You'll hear how his team launched a self service brand system, why internal webinars became their Trojan horse for adoption, and how they're onboarding agencies the same way you'd onboard users to a product. It's a behind the scenes look at how brand stops being just about the aesthetics and starts becoming infrastructure. And why that shift isn't just creative, it's strategic. Let's dive in. Eric Alberts, welcome to the Creative Ops Podcast. So glad you could join us today.
Thanks for having me.
And tell us, you are based in the Netherlands, correct?
That's right. Yeah, I'm Dutch. I come from the Netherlands, and I'm currently at the headquarters of the company that I work, Wolters Kluwer.
Okay, very cool. Well, you are our first guest on the Creative Ops podcast from the Netherlands. Our first uh, Dutch person who's also been on the podcast. So today is you're checking off for me a couple of firsts. So thank you very much for that.
I'm honored.
Um,
Yeah.
and I've been looking forward to this conversation. You and I connected a little while ago on LinkedIn, and we've had a previous conversation. And you're currently the design director at, and I'm going to mispronounce the name. I'm not going to say it as well as you do, Wolters Kluwer's. Am I getting that even close?
You're close. You're close. Yeah, it's a very Dutch name, so I don't blame you for getting it wrong the first time. No,
All right,
it's a
cool.
difficult name
Well,
to pronounce.
hopefully by the end of the episode, I'm getting it right. So you're the design director, and
Yeah.
listeners might be asking, well, why do you have a design director on? This is the Creative Ops podcast. It's because in your role, you also sort of inherited creative ops. And the reason I was looking forward to this conversation and just sort of a preview of some of the things that we'll maybe touch on. One is you've got a pretty deep background in user experience and product building. So I'd like to explore that and how that informs both your approach to design, branding, as well as creative operations. Two is the company you're with is actually 190 years old.
That's right.
And I've long sort of been a fan of, a lot of European companies that have been around for 100 plus years, like Nokia is the one I always think about, and I think it originally started off as a forestry company, and most of us know it as a mobile handset company at some point. I don't know if they still do that. And your company's been around for 190 years. It's done lots of acquisitions over the years. So I also sort of want to dig into, as you're building out this internal team, how are you sort of thinking through, pulling together like a cohesive brand? Because it's a 190-year-old company, so it's got a rich history, but it's also been built over time through a series of acquisitions. So you've got like this jigsaw puzzle of brands, and you've got the internal team you're building out. You work with external agencies. So lots of things for us to explore. But maybe we could just start with, if you could give us a little bit of background about yourself, and maybe talk a little bit about your UX and product experience, and then how you ended up evolving and finding yourself into your current role as design director and by default the head of creative operations.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I started at this company as a UX designer. That's how I came. Uh, that's how I started, and so I've been in product design for a little over 8 years here at this company. And at that time, the whole technology division that I joined was still very small. We were just starting out, and that was in a time, so I'm talking about 10 years ago now, that the company was heavily investing in technology and trying to reinvent itself, because uh, that's kind of what this company is. You mentioned that it's 990 years old, and that's true. It's a company that's been around for a long, long time, and but had to reinvent itself. Especially when the new or our current CEO joined about 20 years ago, that was her mission, was to turn this company around into a technology first company. So when I joined as a UX designer, I was the first one actually hired by my previous boss here in Europe, because we already had uh, just a handful of people in the US doing UX design. But today, last time I counted, or one of my colleagues came up to me and said, I'm now counting more than 200 UX designers in our division. So we've grown very, very rapidly, and that's because we invested a lot in our cloud services, in our technology, in our platforms. So yeah, that's my background, and then I transitioned about 2 years ago to the branding team, which was a completely kind of like new function that was created at that time as well. So it was a very yeah, big transition for me personally, but also for the company investing in branding. So that's where we are more or less today. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've got a lot of questions just to sort of flesh out like your background and context, and then we'll sort of come into you know what you're doing with the branding team today. One is, did you study UX and product design as part of your formal education?
Yes, yeah. So yeah, that was part of my formal education. So I studied multimedia design and communication. So at that time, and I'm yeah, exposing my age a bit, but at that time it wasn't really called user experience. But I think it was about that time that kind of like title or that phrase started to kind of proliferate in the industry. But yeah, so it was called multimedia design at the time. But yeah, there was always a heavy focus on the user and trying to uncover and solve for customer problems. So that's always, that component has always been there. So yeah, and and like more broadly, I've always been interested in design in the broadest sense, art history, creating things myself, always. So it was around the time that yeah, the PC started to enter everybody's living room, that also design software came about, and that immediately grabbed my attention. So that's how I started out, just trying to learn these tools myself, and then that was a kind of a natural choice for me to study this and to kind of pick this education, and then yeah, and then rolled into my first UX role after I graduated, or after I did my master's, and now I'm here in the branding team. So yeah, it's been a long road. Yeah.
Yeah, it's well, I'll age myself as well. I remember that time too. It wasn't even called UX for me. It was called human factors design,
Right.
is what it was called. And you might also recall someone by the name of Jacob Nielsen, who I believe is from your part of the world, who did a lot of the early thinking around UX and
Yeah.
things like that. And a lot of it is still relevant because it's just rooted in a lot of common sense around the way human beings operate. So you studied that. You went into a UX role or whatever it was called back then. You got involved in product design, and that world is very over time. It's developed a lot of practices, I would say, not rigid practices, but the ways to think about how to do good UX and product design. And I think one of the narratives, perhaps false narratives, around branding and creative is that it is it is just wide open, unstructured thinking. So, two questions, and I'll ask them both. And let's start with the first one. One is, what sort of made you, as somebody who'd invested so much time in learning and working in UX and product design, to move over to the brand side? What was it that attracted you to that? And then maybe we'll follow that up with is, what similarities did you see between the two, and where did you see differences in how the work was approached? So let's start with the first. Like, what attracted you to go from UX and product design to brand?
Yeah. Yeah, a couple of things. So first, I've always been interested in visual design. Like UX is a very broad profession, which has a lot of components to it, including visual design. I've always been kind of like originally kind of like driven by the visual side of it. Uh, Not saying that that's the kind of like the most important part of UX. It certainly is not, but it's been kind of like my strength always. So when the opportunity came to create a team and to join the branding team, which was the branding function didn't really exist prior to 2022. So it was an opportunity to build something new from scratch and to add value to this company and to our customers in a different way than from the coming from a product angle. So the visual design aspect of it, the aesthetic aspect of it, is something that that pulled me in. But also, I mean, in terms of timing, it was also after eight and a half years, seeing the UX team grow to the amount it is now and to the size it is now. It was also, I think, kind of a natural move to make for me personally in my career. I spent the last years in the UX team building out the product design system for Wolters Kluwer from scratch. So that's something that that we were able to launch, and that's now kind of has become the global standard for our products. So when that thing launched and was came saw that kind of like it's coming to life, that was also a moment for me to think about, hey, what's next? And so that it was kind of good timing at that point when the branding team came along. So those two came together. Yeah.
So I'll ask my second question again, but before that, like, just to sort of react to some of what you shared. It sounds like you and the others in those early days of this UX and product design team, you built this system so that as the team grew to 200, and perhaps it's still growing or it will over time, as others sort of come in, there's almost like this product design operating system that had been built at the company, and people now understand, here's how we build products, here's the process we go through, here's the questions we ask at different stages, here's the inputs and outputs at different stages of the product design process. So it almost sounds like an operating system. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It was always intended to be a self-service model. So we created our documentation. We created it was all kind of like internal, of course, uh, repositories for documentation, live examples. For developers, we had places to go to see the components live in action and to copy and paste the code snippets from. So it was really always intended to be its own kind of like running thing without having the core design system team having to step in and to onboard teams, right? So off the bat, the business units in our company are able to just go to these repositories, to go to Figma, to our UI library, and to start working with it. And that's also, it was really nice to see that also happened, because there were at some point product launches that used and leveraged the design system without us knowing it, right? And that was the proof that it was working. So that was really nice to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think as better than most, one of the discussions going on in the world of creative and creative ops is how do we sort of decentralize the way we do creative or the way we do branding? And I believe that depends on really what you're sort of highlighting is having an operating system, and you built that with the product design process at. I won't continue saying the name and butchering it. I'll just say WK. So
WK,
you did
yeah.
that at WK, and now you've moved over. You went over to branding. So one, it's sort of surprising to me that a 190-year-old company did not have an internal, like, branding and creative team. So, was it
Yeah.
just that all the business units, just outsourced everything to agencies of all sorts and worked with freelancers? And you're I guess the question I wanna
That
ask
was,
is
yeah, yeah. It is kind of striking indeed that we didn't have that on a global level. We do have and still have and did have design teams on a business unit level, but this is a very large company, so it's almost 22,000 employees, and we're active all around the world. But it has to do, and the reason why we didn't have this on a global level is because originally this company has been always been kind of like a holding company, an acquisition company. So we would buy other companies, put them all under the same kind of holding parent company, but we would leave those acquisitions run and be. So it was always very fragmented in that sense. But it's only been since last, let's say, 5 to 10 years that we've made a shift towards more becoming an enterprise company, where things are run more from the center. So we started centralizing functions like HR, finance, strategy, M&A, those kind of things, and branding and comms, of course, was also something where we saw a value in centralizing and creating central functions for. And then that's also how my role was created. So we saw that, of course, in the larger branding space, that design is a very important pillar. So there was an opportunity there to start driving our brand guidelines and our house style more from the center, and in an attempt to create more consistency and higher quality of design across the company.
So where do you even start with that? Because it's a 190-year-old company. It's got all these it's not even just like different functions, right? Like large organizations would have marketing, sales, so on and so forth. But this was also a lot of probably what felt like independent individual businesses that were operating around the globe that had their own, I would assume, their some sort of brand identity already. So
Yeah.
you've got this on one hand, you've got this blank sheet of what is the parent company's brand identity and what do we want it to be moving forward. And it's backed by this 190-year history. And on the other hand, you've got all these puzzle pieces of all these, I'm going to assume all these individual brands of all these companies that have sort of come into WK over those 190 years. So where
Right.
do you even start with something like that?
Yeah, good question. It's it's um, it's a huge mountain to climb, I admit, and it's not easy. But we are starting to see now the contours of our work now, which is nice to see. But yeah, I mean, the place to start is it all starts, I think, with senior leadership understanding the value of branding and understanding the necessity and the value of investing in branding, because ultimately that leads to more traffic, more revenue, and so on. And that's so that's where it all starts, and then it's up to us to figure out how to get there, right? To put it in a simple way. But like you said, it's super hard. It's a very heterogeneous environment, with all these different brands. trying to get them all into the fold. And it's even harder because we've despite all the fragmentation and heterogeneity, we've been a very successful company. If you look at our stock price, it's only gone up since our CEO joined 2 decades ago. So it's also about trying to convince people of investing in branding and centralizing things and doing things differently while we are successful. That's even harder, I would say. So yeah, but we're starting to get there, and that's because we did a refresh of our brand on the master brand level a couple of years ago to create a stronger identity for Wolters Kluwer as a master brand. But in kind of like in the last year, 2 years or so, we started to also bring in our product brands, our solutions, and trying to create more consistency across the product landscape more and more, and trying to link up the master brand with the solutions more and more. So that's something that we're now hard at work at trying to get that established, and that ultimately should lead to more awareness, which more awareness would naturally lead to more leads and to more revenue and so on, right? So that's the path that we're on, and it's going to be a very tricky and windy road, but we're getting there. Yeah.
One of the things that I've been sort of thinking a lot about lately is, and you're touching on it when you're saying, you had to convince the executive team. What is brand, and how do you sort of like convince people of the value of brand? And I'll just expand on that a little bit. I think brand has sort of been confused with like simply being brand guidelines. This is our logo. This is our preferred font. And just sort of the mechanics of how brand gets expressed. But is brand more than that? And really, what is being sold to the executives? And I want to get to all the sort of business units and things like that and how you convince them. But let's
Mm.
start. Like, to you, what is brand? Is it brand guidelines? Is it the logo? Is it the fonts? Or is it more than that?
No, it's more than that. Absolutely. It's nice that you call out the logo because that's all we had basically. A few years ago before we did our brand refresh, people would just slap the Wolters Kluwer logo on everything and expected it to be branded. And that was kind of the very limited view of branding that people had in this company. But when the VP of global branding joined just a few months before I made my transition over to the branding team. One of the first things that he tried to do was to raise the maturity level of our branding capabilities in the company, and we're doing that through all kinds of ways, through our webinar series, educating people about the value of branding in general. But on the design side, to give you an example of that, it's more than just guidelines. What we did in the past year, we invested in our very own sound identity. So because sound, having a sonic logo is also something very powerful asset to have in your toolbox of things you can use to create brand awareness. And so it's the combination of all those different elements combined that makes up our house style and our identity. So it's the logo in combination with our colors, with our typography, with our photography, and now also including our sound identity that make up the Wolters Kluwer identity. So it's definitely more than just a logo. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been hearing and seeing, and more companies invest into sound identity. I think it's a really exciting space, and to me, sound, I think, is one of those things that evokes the most basic of human, like it's like playing the human instrument, right? Like the right sound can like put someone into the right
Oh yeah.
feeling. And when I
Yeah.
think about it from a brand point of view, like a brand ultimately is about what is the type of feeling you want somebody to have when they interact with you? Like when,
Right.
and it could be when they look at your logo, hear your sound identity, or even when, and this is like sort of the origin of why you and I spoke and why we're talking today and recording it is this sort of goes back to product design because um, and I'm making some assumptions here, so you correct me if I'm wrong. I think really good product design makes the user of whatever product they're interacting with feel a certain way. It makes them feel smart. It makes them feel, it gives them some sort of joy. Smart, laughter,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
efficient, whatever it is. So
Empowered. Yeah.
as you, yeah, as you sort of think back to your product design and UX days, what from that have you sort of pulled into the way you think about like building out the brand for WK?
Yeah. It's a good point, especially in branding, more than in product design, I think. But still, there's definitely overlap. It's about aesthetics and about emotions, evoking certain emotions with people, and trying to draw attention to your brand and standing out from the crowd. And in order to do that, you need to stand out. You need to you need to evoke certain emotions with your audience. So for sure, that's especially in branding very important. Um, in UX, it's about the user, and it's the whole solution that you build. It's about solving customer problems and to make them do their work more efficiently, especially in the areas or the markets that we operate, which is that's very much true because we serve professionals in healthcare, in the legal area, in the tax area, compliancy area. So we need to provide them with solutions that make their jobs easier to do, and that requires, especially for the UX team, to emphasize and to place ourselves in the shoes of the end user and to understand the jobs that need to get done and the problems that they face. So that is something that I'm bringing into the branding space in a way where it's not so much about validating problems or those kind of things, but it's more about how do you measure if something's effective or not. And I think that's something you can very well do in branding as well as in product. Because if you put a campaign out there on social media and you have a certain design that you have or a template that you have that you use for social media, there you can measure that. You can measure the effectiveness of that campaign, of that post, and you can adapt your design based on the data that you gather and the insights that you gather from those campaigns, because you can track that, you can measure it. So, to give you an example, we have social media templates for Facebook, LinkedIn, those kind of channels. Um, but we provide the design as a design team to these teams that communicate through these channels. But we want to hear back from those teams to understand if the designs are effective or not, which is very similar to how things work in product. You want to put something out there and you want to track and you want to see if something's effective or not, and you want to measure that. So that's definitely an overlap that I see between branding and UX. It's something that I took along from my time working in the UX team.
Is that for like that data that you're looking at? You mentioned campaigns. So is that looking at like short-term data? How did this campaign perform? Are there other sort of branding metrics you look at in terms of like building that long-term value and sustainability of the relationship with the audience, the customer, the prospects?
Yeah, we it's a very important metric for us because I mentioned before that we're trying to elevate our awareness for our master brand. So you need to track that in order to understand if you're successful, yes or no, right? So, but we also use kind of metrics that kind of give an indication of whether that awareness is rising, yes or no. So we can measure that through traffic coming to our website, for instance. That's a way to track that, but also through the campaigns and the communication that we do through social media. So we are from a global team. From a global team standpoint, we're trying to combine all of those data points to see if that's helping us to create more awareness for our brands and for our product brands.
So you mentioned a while ago that I think you mentioned you do webinars internally to educate people on the value of branding. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Could you tell us a bit more about like those? How did that start? Like, what was the reason for doing them, and who does them? Like, what sort of the
Yeah.
content do those webinars?
Yeah, I mean, it has to do with where we're coming from, right? Because there was little to no branding activity in this company prior to 2022, more or less. So, partly due to the fact that it wasn't needed, we were still successful, right? So that's because of the markets that we operate in. It's very B2B, right? So um, the investment level in terms of percentage of our revenue is relatively low compared to other companies out there, including B2B companies. So there wasn't really a necessity, um, right, to or an incentive to invest in branding all that much. But since we're now, the we want to, of course, we have shareholders, right? We want to increase our revenues. So that means that we need to speak to a larger crowd, a larger audience. So we want to raise our awareness of our brand and really get into the minds of the buyer, right? The buyer persona, people buying our products. So yeah, so there's definitely now there is a need. That's also the reason why I have this job here in this company now, is to invest much more in branding than we did before. But in order to be successful, we need to make sure that we all speak the same language and that everybody's on the same page in terms of what branding means and how it can be of value to this company. So that's why we started with our capability series or a webinar series that explains what branding is and what some of the kind of like the ins and outs of branding and how you can apply certain methodologies in order to be more successful on that front. So it's
That
really
is.
about internal kind of like education and trying to raise the bar a bit internally.
And was that started because you're trying to get people to come to you as an internal resource versus going to external agencies, or was it really just or was it something else that drove starting to do these webinars? I think it's a fantastic idea, and I think there's probably other people, other companies out there, some of whom are listening right now going, we have the same issue internally and people aren't using
Yeah,
what we're building. And you're almost reminding me because in my long background, I've built a couple of tech companies, product companies, and demos are part of building a product company. You do demos internally so that everybody in the organization understands what we're building, why we're building it, how it works, how to talk about it to potential customers. And then you do demos with customers. And again, I keep going back to your product design background.
hmm
It sounds like you're approaching brand as a product, and part of your job is to sell it to your internal customers.
yeah, you're right. It's I haven't looked at it like that before, but I think you're right. I think we are trying to definitely sell branding as a function, as a capability inside of this organization, and and I think that's the only way to really make an impact. If it's just us and we're still a very small team relative to other teams in this organization, if it's just us talking about branding, then we will not move the needle on anything, right? So we need to all sing the same tune, and that's why we came up with this learning series, so that everybody knows what it means when we talk about things like brand architecture, like working on working models, those kind of things, right? So, um, yeah, it's there's definitely a bit of business development to what we're doing and trying to kind of sell ourselves. That's something that I had to do on the branding side or on the design side as well, because we operate as an in-house agency more or less, even though that we're relatively small. But for all these kind of things, we relied previously on external agencies. But these are now capabilities that we're trying to create and grow in house. Uh, of course, to reduce cost, of course, but also to really make an impact and to like I said, to all contribute to that common goal that we have as a company to raise the awareness of our brand.
Yeah, and it's not an overnight thing because in a company of your size, I think even smaller organizations, I guess the executive team could say, well, we have internal branding as a product now. You should just use that. But you're probably going to get better like retention in terms of people understanding the value of it and actually using it if you start with education
Yeah.
and invite people into the process when they're ready. So on that note, you've got all these different business units across your organization. Historically, they would be maybe have some of their own resources or be working with external agencies. What is that like? What does that picture sort of look like today? Are you becoming like this bigger and bigger internal agency where they're coming to you not just for sort of branding as a product, and sort of taking the brand and applying it the way they need to for what they're doing or what their agency is doing? Or are they also coming to you for production work and things like that as well?
Yeah, it's both. It's since we're only just starting out, it's there's a big portion of what the business units are coming to us for is production work. Yeah, so it's like getting things out the door, getting assets created, and that's fine. I mean, that's something that we do, and that's something that I think we do well, and we're an internal service, and we don't cost anything, right? So we don't there's no internal chargeback or anything like that. So there's definitely also the cost component there, which is interesting. But to us, of course, as a team, it's a really nice way also to get our foot in the door with these business units, which previously were much more independent and much more of an island inside of the larger holding company, right? So we're trying to bring everybody in closer and closer, and this is a way to do that. So, but I don't believe in really. I don't think that's realistic for our company. Is to do all of the creative work in house. I believe in a model where we have very strong partnerships with external agencies, long lasting partnerships, where the agencies are fully up to speed on our brand guidelines, and also from a strategic level understand where we're marching towards as a company in a broader sense. And that allows us to be much more flexible, allows us to scale up, in high volume periods throughout the year. So I really believe in that model where we have in-house capabilities along with strong partnerships with external agencies in order to provide, everything that the business unit ultimately needs, because that's kind of our internal customer, if you will, right? That's why we're doing this, who we're doing this for.
Uh, so I've got so many follow-up questions on that. Doing
Yeah.
doing that work internally in a way, is that sort of like the Trojan horse of like your brand product? That's the way you sort of embed it. So somebody comes to you and goes, "Okay, we need X, Y, and Z." You're going, "Great, we do this. There's no cost to you," um, and that's how you sort of embed your brand. And then I guess related to that, external agencies that these business units might be working with, do they manage the relationship with them? And are they responsible for making sure that they're using your brand system? Or are you starting to manage those relationships with external agencies and ensuring that your brand product is being leveraged by them the way you and the executive team at KW want?
Yeah. You said KW, by the way, which is nice. It's W.
Oh,
It's
WK.
WK, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Even the abbreviation is hard. I admit, it's hard. It's a difficult
Okay.
thing. Um, no, yeah. Coming back to your first question, yeah, it's you can see it more or less as a Trojan horse. The services that we provide nowadays. It's a way for us to get a foot in the door with the business units. Um, Sometimes they were not even aware, that we provide these type of services in house. So yeah, it's a way for us. So the production work is a way for us to eventually mature and to grow to a more of an in-house kind of agency model where we do production work along with more strategic conceptual work, because that's the vision that I have for my team and for the services that we provide, that it's not just getting things out the door and producing things, but it's also strategic. There's a strategic component, and we know this company inside out uh, much better than any other external agency out there. So we can really sit down with the business teams to understand what goals they have, what are the things that they want to accomplish, and we can help on a strategic level there as well. So I think that's where I want to be with design inside of this company, and I think that's part of the reason for that is because I think that's where we provide the highest value. But that takes time, and it takes. You know, uh, we need to kind of like prove ourselves a little bit, more or less. And that's
Right.
a way to do that is through doing things that are relatively low effort, but really high value to the business, like, creating assets for campaigns and those kind of things. Um, yeah, as to the management of the relationships with the agencies, yes, that was previously all done on a business unit or divisional level sometimes, but I'm working together along with our global business services teams, procurement teams, sourcing teams, to get visibility in all the individual contracts we have with agencies that are out there. And this is all legacy from us being an acquisition company, right? So there are like long-standing relationships with agencies that existed prior to us acquiring a company, even sometimes, right? So there's all this history, but we're trying to get visibility on all the different contracts that we have with agencies, who these agencies are, what type of services they provide, where they are in the world geographically, in what time zones they are. So trying to map that all out, and then yeah, work together with stakeholders from the business units, the divisions, to make a selection and to come towards kind of like a preferred supplier list, or kind of a creative roster is how we call it. So that's kind of a list that all the business teams can tap into with agencies for support.
And then when you sort of think about it from an operational point of view, and as people who listen to the podcast know, I think creative operations should almost be thought of as like a product job. Like the product is the system for how creative work gets done, whether it's like scale, speed, cost efficiency, quality, impact, however, whatever that system needs to produce for the business. So when you think about like the system of how the work gets done, whether it's done internally through an external agency, and people have longstanding relationships with agencies, or maybe it's a hot new agency and they just want to work with them because somebody in the business thinks they understand the market in a unique way that will
Right.
be to their advantage. Do you think like so it's as you said, you're putting together like maybe a preferred list and things like that. But do you think in-house teams should just have all the work routed through the in-house team? And even if it's going to go to an external agency, the in-house team being that connective tissue. So
Hmm.
it's not about competition, it's about ensuring that, you know, the in-house team has visibility so that brand storytelling, um, you know, audio identity, whatever it is that makes up the brand in total, especially
Yeah.
the stories, those are becoming more persistent and consistent over time, even if the work is being done by external agencies.
Yeah. Yeah, us being the connective tissue, especially now in this moment in time where we are with the company and where we're headed towards, I think it's super important that we are involved. So if work goes to an external agency, then at minimum we need to be aware and be involved. But I think in the more longer term, I think as these relationships with these agencies get more and more established, and like I said before, if they are also fully kind of like onboarded and aware of where we're headed towards as a company strategically, then I think we can let that go as an in-house team uh, to some extent more and more, right? I think because it's also relationships that are built on trust, and these are vetted agencies, and we have good relationships with them. So, if in the longer term a business unit goes out directly to one of these agencies from the preferred list, then I will be okay with that. But I think that's more of a longer term thing because we're just kind of like we're really hard at work now establishing, um, you know. Where we want to be with our brand, how it should be connected to our solutions, and so on. So I see this as a there's a short term component to this answer and a long term answer.
Going back to the product design system that you built and now it's used right across the company, is it also used by external product builders that you might be working that the company might be working with?
No, no, this is meant to be internal only. Yeah,
Okay. But could it be externalized if there was a need for that? Like, because it almost sounds like people sort of dock into
yeah,
a system where they learn here's how WK does product design. And could that same sounds like you're probably going to head down the path here on the brand side. You've got a almost like a brand system for here's how we do and apply brand, here's how we think about it, here's how it sort of ties into the company's business strategy.
right.
Internal teams are starting to get exposed to that through your webinar series. And would it be natural for those external agencies to sort of get streamlined into that as well?
Yeah, who knows? I mean, maybe that is a point where we will end up eventually. I mean, I often check out IBM's design website because I think it's just really well, put together and thought through, and it's all open, right? So it's something that everyone can look at, including their product system at IBM. So, which is called Carbon. So it's all publicly available. Everybody can look at it. Everybody can access, except the code, because the code is, of course, that's IP sensitive, proprietary information. But yeah, I am not against opening up our brand portal, for instance, to the outside world. I think it, if anything, it will help us even with our mission to create more awareness for Wolters Kluwer as a brand. To be honest, but we're not at that point yet. We first need to um, establish a lot of things. There are still some missing pieces to our brand guidelines, but yeah, eventually opening it up to publicly. Who knows? But maybe the intermediate step is to opening it up and allowing agencies from the vetted list to access that type of information. That could be kind of a nice kind of like step in the middle that we would take. But for the design system, yeah, I mean, it's intended to be a self-service model, including the brand, by the way, which is also something to mention, is that it's also intended to be a self-service model, because I believe that we need to empower all employees in this company to create on-brand materials themselves, even those without a design background. So I believe in the kind of the democratization of design in that sense. But yeah, so yeah, external partners, development partners that we may have in the future, uh, they could leverage the design system as well. I think I don't see any issues with that.
That's yeah, I 100% agree with that. I see a lot of in-house teams that I think are missing an opportunity to, as you're doing, building brand as a product and basically teaching external agencies how to use that.
Yeah,
Because I think external agencies are always going to be part of the mix, whether permanently or it'll ebb and flow based on the needs of the business. Um, and I keep coming back to this idea of like how you're approaching and building brand as a product. And surprise, surprise to people listening, I've got to ask about AI.
of course. Yeah,
And so, if brand is a product for you, and products to me are, you know, they tend to be well defined, documented, so that it creates understanding. I think one of the things I see a lot of, both agencies and in-house teams struggling with today when it comes to AI is that they're not able to effectively train AI models. But I do wonder if like brand is approached as a product with that some of that same discipline that you and others bring in from the UX world and the product design world. Do you think it becomes easier to leverage AI tools in the right ways that are beneficial to the business?
yeah. Speaking on behalf of myself personally, I because of my product design background, um, I'm very open to trying out new tools, including everything that we're seeing now around AI and the proliferation of tools like OpenAI with video now as well, um, offerings from OpenAI, but also Google, etc. So I've always had that, because in the product design world at the time when we were building out the design system in the UX team was that was about the time that we that Figma came up. So we always had one eye out, to see, what new companies, startups were coming up, and new tools that were seeing the light of day. So I think I kind of like brought that over to this new team that I have now. So I've been looking at these type of tools, and I think I'm much more open. I think I see much more opportunity to bring these type of tools into the mix. So for me personally, it's hard for me to say if that's because of my UX background, but I think in general, I think it's good to keep your eyes and ears open for anything that's new in this area, right? And it's moving so fast. Uh, the things that we are talking about this week can already be old news next week, right? So we need to be mindful of that. And yeah, I think with AI, of course, there's an automation component to it, and uh, I really see value in that. Also, it allows us to scale brand throughout this organization. So there's something that's called creative automation, and you can see tools like Canva really betting big on that. So it's all kind of like template based, and then you basically train the AI model on your brand and on your guidelines, And yeah, it helps non-designers like marketing folks inside of this organization to create on-brand materials in like under 5 minutes, and that's super super powerful, and it saves the company, a lot of money down the line. And it also it helps us in our mission to create more on brand, more brand consistent materials. And I was in a call the other day with a company, a startup from the West Coast in the US that is doing this, but then in the space of PowerPoint, kind of like presentations. So they're
Right.
leveraging AI models. They're training AI models based on companies' brand guidelines, and that allows the model to create slides that are perfectly on brand. And it's with just the press of a button, you can turn a slide deck that was put together by some executive that had no got proper training on our brand guidelines. You can just press a button and it turns it into an on-brand presentation with photography and everything. So it's there's huge potential. It's what I call kind of like a productivity booster. That's how I'm looking at AI mostly.
Do you sorry, I just want to dig more into like this idea of like brand as a product. You've obviously got brand guidelines and things like that, but is there anything you've done that in putting together your brand guidelines that was informed by the documentation that you would put together in the product design world? Or even when you're working on a project, like in the product design world, we've got PRDs, product requirement documentation, right?
Mm.
And so has any of that like sort of thinking or process or those types of artifacts like translated into what you're doing now in as design director and leading the brand team?
Yeah, absolutely. I think without a doubt. I think even kind of like the way of thinking and approaching brand. I think that has its roots in kind of like product design, is where I'm coming from, and documentation is a very big component to to systems, design systems in general, right? And that's the only way, or not the only way, but it's a very powerful way to create that self-service model. To have well structured, clear documentation, along with, I think, very good examples and do's and don'ts, so that people coming to your system for the first time really understand what quality and what good looks like and things that they should avoid. So I think that's key also for the brand guidelines, that we really make it clear what we consider to be good design, what we consider good design. And that's one of the things that I did with our brand portal, is I included a gallery page, kind of like picking good work from that was created by people in the businesses, putting that like almost kind of like curating that page on a global level and exposing that to other teams. And I'm also doing that through the community of practice for design that I started last year, where we're bringing design folks from within the business units together in a community. And that's where we do show and tells. We show each other our work. There's kind of a design critique component to it as well. And yeah, it's and documentation is key in achieving all the goals that we've set out for us, for ourselves, and for the brand in general. But I think that's also an interesting area to keep an eye out on, because you know um, people don't like to read. That's something that I learned working on the design
Yes.
system. So we had
Yeah.
very extensive, I think, personally well put together documentation, but it was very text heavy. So you need to find the right balance there, between making things visual, easy to understand, uh, versus, kind of like, do you want to write out, making it very wordy and lengthy, right? So another thing where I think UX can help to really do proper research and test things out and do A/B tests to see what works well and what doesn't work.
Yeah, I think you're bang on. Like that documentation piece, it sounds boring, but I think it is critical to ensuring that the brand is consistent, persistent, and over time it's scalable and it achieves the outcomes that you want. I think brand guidelines have become, in my opinion, nothing more than just documentation on, again, like logo, font, and maybe a couple of other things. But I think your points around like, what's the actual goal of the brand? What are we trying to achieve? What is the feeling that we want someone to have when they're interacting with our brand? Because brand then just isn't about like, oh, how do we show up on a landing page? Brand will then, I think, brand done right, and I think brand done as a product will become something that gets diffused across the entire organization. So your point about like you're now working with the product teams, like I assume that's not just about like colors and logos showing up in product interfaces. That's
Right.
also like it sort of intersects with like how does somebody feel when they're using our products, right? Like
Absolutely.
what do we want them to feel like? Because when I use my MacBook versus when I use a PC, I feel different, and that goes into like design decisions, which I think design should really be almost a subset of brand. Because brand to me is like, what is our story as a company? How do we want people to feel? Because ultimately humans are feeling machines, not logic machines. And if anyone disagrees, happy to have that debate. But yeah, and that's why like I love this idea of like that product mindset being applied to brand and brand showing up as a product in an organization. Cause then I think the mindset of how it's thought of, invested into, and really protected and applied is dramatically different.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really approaching brands in a very systematic way, I think, and treating it as a product will also help you to identify where potential weaknesses are in your brand. Still, right? Do you want to? Are there still things missing? Are there things that your audience, your users, don't understand well enough? So, and that's where user research comes into play again, right? And yeah, testing things out. And we want to be consistent, but we won't don't want to be boring and you know it's different. Consistency is different than uniformity, right? So one of our design principles that we have in the team is that we want to be creative, but within the brand guidelines. So we're always trying to identify new angles to approach the brand and to work with the elements that we have available, typography, color, and those kind of things, right? And to assemble those elements in a slightly new, fresh way to keep things interesting. And what you were saying about that there's definitely overlap between UX and branding. I think you hit the nail on the head there because um, yes, of course, if you had to draw a Venn diagram, there's in the middle there are things like colors and typography there, the visual things between product and branding. But it's more than that. It's also about emotion, how you feel, and uh, and I think a great example of a company that does this right. I mean, you mentioned Apple. I think that's a great example. But for
Yeah.
instance, Airbnb does that in a very good way as well because at the core of their brand is community, right? It's building communities, and you can see that it propagates through it shines through their product like in a very clear way. It's built on communities. It's about rating hotels and bed and breakfasts, and then people providing comments and recommendations and those kind of things. So those core brand values are very visible in the product offering, and I think that's, to me, ultimately, I think that's when we can all retire and consider our jobs done here at this company. Is that if our brand values come shining through in our products? I think that's the dream that I have. Then my mission here is done.
Uh, yeah, it might be a while until you can retire because
It will. It will. Yeah.
but I think you're as we're sort of wrapping up here, you're sort of living in the future that more and more people are starting to talk about, or you're starting to step into that future. And this is really about like, beyond brand as a product, it's really about like brand and maybe more broadly, or as a subset of that, creativity really being like decentralized or diffused or just propagated across the entire organization.
Yeah.
I think one of the ways in which companies struggle today is that it's like, oh, branding is those four people over there that do that, or creative is those six people over there that have Photoshop and they do some stuff.
Right.
And I think it's more about a mindset. And once that, and I think you're sort of approaching it in a very, I think, in a unique and interesting way, in that it's brand as a product. As part of that, I think it's like creative as a product. And it's not about saying there's these, as you were saying, are there some like guidelines? Yes. Are they rigid lines? No.
Right.
And for any creatives who are listening, they might be going, but I want a blank canvas and to do what I want. And my response would be, the greatest artists of like all human history, Michelangelo, Da Vinci, whoever else, they also dealt with guidelines. Like, how does light work? And
Right.
how do people like view shapes and perceive them and things like that? Those are guidelines. And I
Yeah.
think it's the same thing with the brand. But going back to the, before I got sidetracked by that, but going back to my point, like brand and creative as a product and diffusing that across an organization, I think that is the next evolution for in-house teams. And others like Emma Sexton from the, I think it's the Inside Out community. Please don't kill me, Emma, if I got that wrong. But she's been talking about this as well. And I think that is critical for the evolution of where brand and creative teams go next.
Cool. Yeah. I wholeheartedly agree with you. Um, I think that that's super interesting to see how that will unfold. We are still very, especially if you compare us to other companies out there, on a design on a design front, uh, is still very much in development and immature in ways. But I think we were very much ahead of the curve, maybe even in our thinking, where we always had this aspiration, this goal, this ambition to empower employees in this company to be creatives themselves, to give them the proper tools, to give them the templates, to give them the assets and the examples and the guidelines to create awesome materials that are on brand themselves. And people sometimes feel a little bit anxious or afraid to step into that role. But if you have if you have all of those components and you show people that it's okay, and that it's also okay to sometimes miss the target in terms of being brand compliant and those kind of things. It's creating that environment and allowing people to kind of like experiment and to create things themselves. I think that's eventually where we want to be in this company. But who knows? Maybe that's kind of something that other companies will embrace more and more as well.
Uh, that's a great point to end on, Eric. Like, that is such a lovely, healthy attitude, saying we do have guidelines. We'll show you examples of what's good. I think also showing examples of what is bad is also
Right.
valuable. But also, saying that you're open to experimentation. And because then I think for in-house teams, especially with, these different business units and external agencies and things like that, being open to experimentation and saying, show us what you did. And because like, you're a great design and product, that right there tells me you're a great product and design thinker, because products, we have an idea as to how the product should be designed and used. And then users will use them and go, but here's what I'm doing. It's not these 4 steps you expected me to take. It's these 5 or these 3 steps. And then we adapt if we think that's the
Yeah.
right thing to do for the product and all users in general. It's the same thing with the brand and creative. Being open to experimentation and looking at what people are doing, and you know how that might continue to allow you to, like, again, branding creative as a product, and that should evolve. It can't be static.
Yeah, because the moment you become static, you become irrelevant and outdated, and that's toxic for any brand out there. So yeah, you need to try to reinvent yourself, which is kind of not just for the brand, but which is kind of a nice analogy also for this company in general. It's something that we've been doing for 190 years now. So I think it's nothing more than logical that we treat our brand the same way.
Well, that's a good point to end on. Perpetual innovation, and
Here's to that. Yeah.
driven by experimentation is good advice for products, for brands, for creative, and even for processes that support the whole creative and branding process. So, Eric, on that, thank you so much for spending some time with me today, and sharing the benefit of your experience and expertise. This is definitely a topic I'll want to come back to, because I think that product and design thinking mindset applied to branding creativity is something we should be talking more about across the creative world.
Yeah, you're more than welcome. And if you ever want to revisit this topic again, more than happy to share my 2 cents on that. Yeah. Thank
All
you.
right, great. Thanks.